And it's Ken Kraetzer for Sons of the American Legion Radio on the West Point Football Report. We're here in downtown White Plains at American Legion Post 135 for another edition of the West Point Football Report with my colleague John Chuhran, and Jack McGuirk will join us in a couple of minutes. And we're going to talk a little bit about Army's big victory at Michie Stadium last Saturday against Eastern Michigan, and their very challenging game on Saturday against Temple University, also at Michie Stadium, which if they win will qualify them for a second straight bowl game appearance, which is a big achievement. John Tran, good to see you. That was an exciting game we saw last Saturday at Michie Stadium.
That was possibly the most exciting game we've seen in the last 5 years, including the Army-Navy victory. The bottom line is that, when you can stop the opposing team from scoring what would be the go-ahead points in the final minute of the game and do it on the goal line, that's the stuff of legend.
Well, it is. Eastern Michigan came in with a vastly improved program. They played a bowl game last year from what we remembered a few years ago. And just back and forth, each team scoring. Eastern Michigan scored early, 15-yard pass play, and Army countered with their first long drive of the day, 93 yards. Army would have two drives over 90 yards in the game, all of their drives over 75 yards. Eastern Michigan took the lead again on a 45-yard pass play from Brogan Roback, and gave the Eagles a 14-7 lead. But Army countered again with a 75-yard drive. Kel Walker took a pitch out from Ahmad Bradshaw, ran right, evaded a couple of tacklers, and dived into the end zone right in front of the Corps Cadets. And with Blake Wilson's PAT, that tied the game at 14-0 at 14-all at the half. Then Army got out to lead on a Connor Slumpka 2-yard run, again off a 94-yard 7-play drive by West Point. John, you could see the Eastern Michigan defenders really looking frustrated in the middle of these long Army drives. They just couldn't figure out how to stop the drive and get off the field.
Well, Coach Chris Creighton pointed out that Army is a well-oiled machine, he said after the game. This is the kind of game that Army plays, and they execute, and it's very difficult to stop. The fact of the matter is, you could see it also in time of possession. Army had the ball for 37 minutes to the 23 for Eastern Michigan, and the reality is that, it's very hard to win that way. I mean, unless you're scoring quick strikes, quick touchdowns, it's very, very difficult to win. Roback had a very good game. He was 19 for 27 for 229 yards and threw all 4 touchdowns for him. But the bottom line is, they just couldn't control the ball enough that would give them the victory. And I have to give credit to Coach Chris Creighton. He made the decision after they scored what could have been a touchdown to give a tie. He made the decision that they would go for the 2-point conversion right there at the end of the game. And it was a really, really gutsy call. But I can understand it. I mean, the reality is, if you go to overtime, and they had tied it in the final minute, and the game did go to overtime, if that were the case, then you have to take the ball at the 25 and still march in. Here, you're starting on the 2-yard line, and all you've got to do is get in. You only get one chance at it, but this would be a chance to win. And on the road, you take your chance to win.
Yeah, it makes sense. It brought back to mind a famous Army Notre Dame game at the Meadowlands about 20 seasons ago, where Army caught up by scoring 3 touchdowns in the fourth quarter. And they were down 1 point with just moments to play left in the game, and they decided to go for a 2-point conversion rather than go for the tie. And the play ran right at the right post, right on the corner of the end zone, and the Army runner was tackled by the Notre Dame safety right on the flag. And they called it the $7 million tackle because if Notre Dame had won that game, they wouldn't have gone to a bowl game that year and not gotten their fee. But Army really had a big comeback that game. That was when Bob Sutton was the coach, and a very exciting day at the Meadowlands. So it came down to that last drive. Army had the lead 28-21, and Eastern Michigan drove down the field. They got the ball back with less than 5 minutes to play, and they engineered an 11-play drive to score. But then they went for the 2-point conversion, as you said, John. And the first time they tried it, they threw a pass right over into the middle of the end zone, right in front of the goalpost, but it was knocked away. But then the referee called that the coach had called for a timeout just before the play started. So they negated the play, and they had to set up all over again. And then on the second attempt, this time they ran to the left, and James Gibby Gibson made a tackle that's going to be long remembered. I was standing right next to General Caslin, the superintendent, and we were watching this and saw Gibson make the play on about the 2-yard line, upending the runner from Eastern Michigan, who fell right on the 1-yard line, couldn't quite get the ball over the line into the end zone. And so the 2-point conversion attempt was no good, and made it 28-27. Army was able to take a onside kick attempt. John Voight got the ball, actually. They put him out on the hands team, the Army defensive lineman. And so Army ran out the clock with about 40 seconds. But that wasn't exciting. As exciting a game as we've seen at Michie Stadium in quite a while.
Well, the other interesting thing about it was that Gibson, in making that final play, went against Ian Erickson, who had rushed for over 100 yards and was clearly the leading rusher for Eastern Michigan in the game. And the great thing about it was they were alone. There was nobody else near them. It was just these two combatants who were going to decide the outcome of the game. They collided like two massive freight trains out there on the field. They hit each other head on, and Erickson flipped over the back of Gibson, landed on his forearms and his shoulders, clearly was a yard short, and you knew then and there that barring a fumble on the ensuing kickoff, Army was going to win that game. And it's the kind of game that Army's waited for a very long time to execute, because they haven't really had the chance to do that in recent years. And this really emphasized the fact that this is a team that deserves to be 5-2, maybe even deserves to be 6-1 if you take away the game against Tulane.
Yeah, that's what a lot of people refer to, but there are games where you're not perfect, and Coach Munkin felt that they played well against Temple. They just couldn't stop that last drive. But this is turning out to be a very good season. Temple is going to be a challenging team. We've seen Temple in the past run over Army with a big offensive line, big running game that Army couldn't stop 4 or 5 years ago. And but now Army had the huge win last year, opening night down in Philadelphia at the Link, where they defeated Temple and really had the game won early in the fourth quarter. Mm-hmm. People started leaving early, and this was a game that the fans at Lincoln Financial Field of Temple were really planning on a big day of college football with all the pageantry, and all of a sudden the air went out of the game a few minutes into the fourth quarter when Army took a substantial lead. But as Coach Munkin said, different team on both sides. Temple's got a new coach, Jeff Collins, who comes to them from the University of Florida, where he was a defensive coordinator. A coach who has been at all the top programs in the Southeast. He spent some time at Alabama, at Georgia Tech, and a couple of other places. Coach Munkin knows him well, and Coach Collins very highly respected and was due to get a major college coaching opportunity. Good passing game and a good running game. So it kind of looks a little bit like Eastern Michigan in terms of offense. What are you seeing, John?
Well, I think that it's going to be an interesting game against Temple. Temple is only 3-4 when you come into this game. They are coming off 2 losses. They had a really tough loss their last time out, 28-24, for their homecoming game against University of Connecticut. But they had some bright spots in that game. They had redshirt sophomore quarterback Logan Markey. He had his second career 300-yard passing game. I mean, he's a starter for the first time this year. To have 2 300-yard starting games, that's pretty darn good. He found 10 different receivers in the course of the game, and that was one of these things that the team certainly looks to with pride, and this is something that Army is going to have to worry about. Army is not a great team against the pass. We know this. I mean, we've seen this in the past, and this is something they need to worry about. Now, their running game isn't so tremendous. They have a guy named Raquel Armistad, who is their star runner, but he's only got 275 yards through 7 games. So it's not really that big of a game for them. Defensively, they're a pretty darn good team. They've got safety Devin Randall. He picked up 5 tackles and an interception. And redshirt senior defensive back Artrell Foster had 4 tackles and the lone fumble recovery. Their key defensive player is a fellow named Chappelle Russell. He had 12 tackles, 1 for a loss, and 2 forced fumbles. Russell, as a linebacker, he's the key guy to watch in this game. However, you mentioned the point that they've gone through several coaches. This is something that certainly will play into Army's hand, because the reality is this is a team that is still learning itself, still figuring out what it can do. Army, on the other hand, they know what they can do. They had their Army-Navy game win last year. They had their bowl game win last year. They're 5-2 this year. This is a team that just continues to build on the past successes. I think Army's going to pull out another victory.
Well, I tend to agree, although, I still have these vivid memories of these very strong Temple teams from 3-4 years ago, really pushing their running game behind a big offensive line. But as we've learned in college football, when you change your head coach, that makes a big difference. Coach Monken said it's a completely new staff, and as he learned his first year, it's tough until you bring in some of your own players. So it may take Temple a couple of years to mature as in a new a new era for them. But I think Army's going to be as fortunate as Coach Monken said today. We're up at practice. The offensive line took a lot of kind of aches and pains in that game. There were 3 players, he said, have been held out of practice so that they can heal up a little bit. But he expects at least 2 of them to play. He didn't hint at which one might be out. If it's Bryce Holland, he'll find a way to get back in the game.
You also mentioned that the coach said that one of the key defensive backfield players, Ryan England, is expected back at least by the Air Force game, if not before. And that's encouraging, because I think that getting that kind of leadership, that kind of experience is definitely going to help the secondary.
Well, that's going to be, we're going to have 2 weeks to talk about the Air Force game, and that's certainly been a key goal for this Army football team. But let's put that one off until this Temple game is completed. We'll have a bye week before heading out to Colorado Springs for that big game. And so I think Army should do well. I think their offense is so methodical now. It's so well run by Ahmad Bradshaw, the quarterback, number 17. Coach Monken was talking about him in the Tuesday conference call, that he is poised. He runs the offense well. He knows how to hit the holes. He can break tackles, and he's making the pitch plays very precisely. Very limited turnovers this year. And he doesn't need to pass. He's got that offense going. 4 drives over 75 yards last week.
Yes, but the reality is that for Army to really succeed as the season wears on and they play better opponents, for them to succeed, they need to truly be a triple option team. And the reality is that so far they're a triple option in name only. When you come to the passing game, Army went 0 for 5 on Saturday. That means that they're just 8 for 38 for 125 yards and 4 interceptions on the entire season for all 7 games. So really, you're looking at a double option team, not a triple option team, where either the quarterback runs with the ball or the running back runs with the ball. That's been very effective for them. On Saturday, they ran for 413 yards. Ahmad Bradshaw, the quarterback, led the way with 171 yards on 19 carries, and Kel Walker led the other running backs with 121. Darrell Woolfolk came back. That was a big situation where Woolfolk came back. He'd been out for the preceding 2 games, and he'd been hurt in the Ohio State game, and so he had actually missed those games. He contributed 51 yards, and Andy Davidson added 37 more. So Army has clear options when it comes to runners, but they do need to try and get some options in there in terms of passing to keep the other teams honest, because when you play better teams, if they know you can't pass, they're going to key on the run.
Well, that's something Coach Monken gets asked about every press conference, is when is Army going to start throwing the ball, especially by reporters that are less familiar with the team. Army just says that they have groomed this team to be a running team. And one of the reasons they did that was because at the academies, it's hard to have the consistent size in your offensive linemen. And if you're playing smaller offensive linemen, which was more the case in the past, Army's been able to grow their offensive line. Bryce Holland is about 295, Brent Toth at 300, When Jackson Deaton is in, he's 305, especially on that right side. They have some size. But when you're run blocking and you know what you're going to do, it's easier for smaller offensive linemen to be effective. It's pass blocking when you got to square up and try to defend a 280-pound speeding defensive lineman. That it's really tough for the smaller players. So
it's absolutely right, Ken. But also, in addition to the line, we have to really truly look at the quarterback too. Bradshaw has definite strengths and weaknesses when he goes out there. His key strength is a runner. He may be the best running quarterback in the nation. He's that good. But the reality is, every time he goes back to pass, the ball floats. He doesn't have the cannon arm that you would expect to see from a Peyton Manning or from a Brett Favre or somebody who is really much of a howitzer. When he throws it up, it floats, and every time I see it up there, I wonder who's going to grab it. And in most instances this year, it's nobody. And this unfortunate fact is he's thrown almost as many interceptions as pass completions this year. So that's a problem. And so that's the reason they don't throw. It's not his strength, but they can get away with it because he's so good at holding the ball. As a senior, he knows to the last possible fraction of a second how far he can get away with it, and he can play that double option really well. And that's been enough to make them 5-2, and hopefully it'll make them 6-2 come Saturday.
Well, I think my big concern is that he's carried the ball himself 109 times so far this year, and on most of the plays, as you said, John, even if he hands it off to the fullback or pitches it to the slot back, he takes a hit as a decoy. So he's getting hits. He's probably, if he runs the ball himself 10, 12 times a game, and then he's taking another 10 to 15 hits. So he's getting hit 25 times a game. And he's not a big guy, but he really worked hard in the weight room to get in shape. You stand next to him, you see how strong a player he is. And so he's been able to hold up. But my concern is just that he's the one indispensable player on this Army football team right now. Absolutely. And if he gets hurt, it's going to be a big change at quarterback.
Absolutely right. I mean, it's just like you watch in the pros. You see what happened to Aaron Rodgers with the Green Bay Packers. It's a different team without their star quarterback. Well, it would be a different team at Army without Ahmad Bradshaw. And you're right. He needs to protect himself, but he does a very good job at that. And hopefully that'll continue, and hopefully he won't have any severe injuries.
And he is just a terrific young man, poised, as Coach Munkin said today.
He's a leader.
Very professional, a leader, as you said, and he's going to be a great officer in the United States Army when he graduates in June or in May and serves our country. Great guy. And so, John, any further thoughts about this game, 12 noon kickoff on CBS Sports Network?
Just that, I expect that the weather will be good, and it's supposed to be warm again. It's supposed to be up near 75 degrees. That means that you won't really have an issue with passing. I mean, passing sometimes when it's cold becomes more difficult, but that'll be work in Temple's favor because their game with marquee passing, that could be trouble for them. Absolutely. John Chuhran, thank you very much. Appreciate your analysis. And, Jack McGuirk is moving in. I want to tell you a little story that one of our listeners sent us today. That being that today is the 50th anniversary of the loss of Don Hollander in Vietnam. Don Hollander was Army football player in the 1950s, a very good wide receiver, an All-American who Coach Blake asked to play quarterback out of necessity his senior year, and he went in and did that, and led Army to a solid season. But he went into the Army and served and went to Vietnam. And on this date, October 17th, 1967, while trying to rescue men who were trapped in the middle of a fierce battle, he was killed in action, and he is interred at Arlington National Cemetery. So, great American Don Hollander. The basketball hockey building just next to Michie Stadium is named for him. And when I was up there today, I took a photo of the plaque honoring him. Don Hollander, great American, great Army football player, a great graduate of West Point, who died 50 years ago today in Vietnam. Now we have Jack McGuirk, and do we have you all lined up? Now am I right? And Jack, I know you've been following some of the other Service Academy games in Maritime. Give us an update.
Yeah, well, Air Force had their second win of the year. They're 2-4 now, 34-30 over UNLV. UNLV actually had a 27-0 lead over the Falcons with 3:28 left in the first half. Falcons quarterback Arian Worthman rushed for 116 yards and had 5 rushing touchdowns in the game. He also threw for 72 yards on 4 passes. The Falcons had 473 yards total offense, 401 rushing. The Falcons' first score of the game was on a 14-yard touchdown run by Worthman with 42 seconds left in the half. Worthman then had 2 rushing touchdowns in the third quarter and 2 in the fourth quarter, including the game winner, a 1-yard run with 2:14 left in the game. So the Falcons are 2-4 overall, 1-2 in the conference, and they're going to be heading on the road to take on Nevada on Friday night. And that game's actually going to be at 9:30 on Friday night on CBS Sports, which, of course, covers Army games. But second win of the year for Air Force. And as I mentioned, 27-0 at one point in the first half. So their defense continuing to struggle a bit. So you wonder if Army's going to take advantage of that in a couple of weeks.
They're going to do everything they can to take advantage of Air Force in 2 weeks in Colorado Springs. I can guarantee you that. It should be a great game. We enjoy going out there. A great school to visit. But Air Force lost a lot of players off their Commander-in-Chief Trophy team last year. And so this is kind of a rebuilding year for them, although they really played well coming back against Navy, and a comeback win against Nevada says a lot about their determination.
Absolutely. Now, Navy had their first loss of the year to Memphis, 30-27. Lost to Memphis on Saturday. Navy quarterback Zach Abey rushed for 146 yards, including 3 touchdowns. First score of the game was a 22-yard field goal by Navy kicker Bennett Mooring. Navy turned the ball over 5 times in the game on 3 fumbles and 2 interceptions, all by Zach Abey. Navy running back Malcolm Perry rushed for 68 yards. Navy had 314 yards of rushing in the game. Navy scored on a Zach Abey touchdown run with 3:25 left in the game and closed the score to 30-27 and forced Memphis to punt on the following drive. But on the first play after that punt, Zach Abey threw an interception, sealing the win for Memphis and Navy's first loss of the season. So they're now 5-1 overall, 3-1 in conference. They're going to host UCF on Saturday. So Navy having a problem with ball possession there. 5 turnovers, not good for the midshipmen.
And Central Florida is a very good team this year. It's going to be a real test for Navy, a very determined team, a very proud team. We've been following them on the feature by Ross Greenberg this season in Navy football each week. And I think we're just going to see an epic Army-Navy game this year. I think it's going to be for the Commander-in-Chief Trophy, and both teams will want it very badly. Never forget the time we were with Secretary of the Navy, then Ray Mavis, and talking about the Air Force-Navy rivalry, and he said, "We want our trophy back." So it should be fun. So tell us about the Maritime College game.
Yeah, SUNY Maritime had another win, or improved to 5-1. It was a 51-15 big blowout win at home over Anna Maria. Quarterback Thomas Wright threw for 334 yards, including 2 touchdown passes. Quarterback Joseph Butterworth threw for 49 yards, including a 16-yard touchdown pass to junior wide receiver Cormac Quigley with 5:36 left in the game. Running back Chris Olberling led the team with 132 yards rushing, including 2 touchdowns of 12 yards and 2 yards. Wide receiver Andrew Jenny had an 11-yard touchdown run in the first quarter. Wide receiver Brandon Drumkel had 129 yards on 10 receptions, including an 8-yard touchdown pass from Thomas Wright with 1:48 left in the first half. Matt Ward caught a 10-yard touchdown pass from Thomas Wright in the third quarter. Privateers had a team record 628 yards total offense, 245 yards rushing, and a team record 383 yards passing. On defense, senior linebacker Kendall Parker led the Privateers with 6 tackles. Linebacker Craig Hendricks came up with a 2-yard safety in the first quarter. The Privateers, as I mentioned, 5-1, and they're heading up to Newton, Massachusetts this weekend to take on Mount Ida. So 5-1, they're off to a strong start.
Yeah, Coach Clayton Hendrick Holmes, probably it's one of his stronger teams this year. They have a chance for a postseason playoff opportunity, so we'll look forward to following their season. And the other thing I noticed this weekend, Jack, was Ohio State crushed Nebraska. in Lincoln. And I mean, that game was over well before halftime, and they crushed Rutgers at Rutgers. And obviously they're getting into form. They lost one game to Oklahoma early in the year, but Army kept the game competitive into the third quarter. It was 17-7, and Army kept driving. Army had a 99-yard drive against Ohio State, and was competitive, more so than some of these Big Ten opponents that Ohio State has played. And I think that speaks well to the strength of this Army team that we're following, that they played Ohio State tougher than some of the Big Ten opposition, which I think Coach Monken and his team should take some credit and feel good about.
Oh, absolutely. Coach Monken did a great job keeping them in the game. And it was great to see Coach Monken on Saturday after the game, right before they sang the alma mater of the school. He got the crowd really fired up, and he just loves it up there.
Yeah, he was. Coach Monken was really excited with the win, and he got really animated in front of the Corps cadets and in front of the team. And so really, everyone said it was one of the most exciting moments that they have seen at Michie Stadium in a long time. Now, just to wrap up, I want to thank our sponsor, the Westchester Bank branches throughout Westchester County, and check their website, thewestchesterbank.com. And if you are a veteran, just call them up and ask to speak to the CEO, JT, and he'll take care of you. So just to wrap up today, we are at Post 135 of the American Legion in downtown White Plains, New York. And for Jack McGuirk and John Chuhran, I'm Ken Kraetzer for Sons of the American Legion Radio and the West Point Football Report.